라니 내제마디사 남다 신나져봐 이랑 고르는 아니야다야미 오야 이외 이 왜 지난주 이때 로가 마조가 다시 지지 로가 이 장으로 묻히디 다시 지지 장으로 묻히 다시 지지 대화를 도와 요 말에 야 빨리 요 말에 자면서 다니겠어 잡자 숨디 장으로 묻히 대화지 도와
네. 요말.
저게 말이 된다지 이시자주 이십시 제 차상 요아래 이제 차상 요아디 야야 다 이제 다른 자가라 줘쇼 다 자주디 rab지 니루바데 안에 가서 근데 하나 중에 대 차라차와 다 접제 바데 가서 맞아 차와
사마레
아
마레 디
권조 차례 아
좋게
권조 가서 샤샤레 나는 고대만 떼지 로기 라 저제 고대만 떼주시 니나라 디니스 중요하래 가로 거도 아니 저거 지제요 야 저 구심해라 나
in purification practice there's it's said that there's the burning of seeds. Which links or factors of dependent origination should we focus on? Us referring to ordinary beings. Any tikpa jangwala? Tikpa jangwa? Tikpa jangwa. The sabun segures. Sabun sekpa.
하세
sabun sekpa burn sikpa
하세 하고만
me sikpa re
가르시
sabun kasa tikpe sabun
실외
no sekure mepasugurwa
리바 메마소레스 아니 저 가르쳐서
디 체라 연락 춘이기라나 나네 연락 가기 단다와요레스 연락 춘이 단다 연락 춘이 디
저와 가리오레스 디바 체베 나미지 데우들라 야나 중이 거나 동화 삼바데 와 동화 야나 중이 삼베 가나 아니 디바기 나미지 데우들라 동화 영화데 시디 잠바 데우 동화 미데나 아니 디바데 샤고와 자고 샤바치고야지 아니 로레옹 그레스 와 나자 유디 가라 나디 잠바 나자데 그 예미 타네 아니 나사디 주칼라 칼라테나 추원 거가 안에 테드 메바세요 그 멘데니 아니 메바세요 그 삼도 코온 거와 좋아 연상 미게빌레 디바스나 미게빌레스가 미게빌레지 남이 제부텔라 동아 중화지 시니 동아 미데바이나 다 동아 도고가 나 동아 규데 미게빌레지 도고 그래
So basically, if we're talking about the seeds as being in reference to like the karmic propensities or the deposits of negative types of actions being placed within oneself, and to purify those, one has to destroy them or incinerate them. Then that's connected to the 12 links or factors of dependent origination in order to want to do that in the first place, one has to understand the negative consequences of those actions, negative types of actions, that suffering arises from negative actions, a non-virtuous formed karma. And so in order to wish to get rid of that, you have to understand how it is that those kinds of negative actions are the source and the cause that give rise to the massive suffering in independent origination. So then there's methods of purifying these misdeeds or negative actions are given in the part of the stages of the path that pertains to the person of lesser scope. And in that, it's explained how one is able to do that by means of the four powers and so forth.
Yeah.
Yes. Could Rinpoche please explain what disintegration means in the Prasangika system, to explain how karma is deposited and later ripens? Let's see. Tangiwe lukla shikpa yorve shikpa. Mare shikpa. Shikpa ngoborupa. Di dang legi bakchak dang namen drawa kari yores.
Shikpa
dang legi bakcha dang legi namen.
Legi bakcha sina le tagi namu jawuchibi niwa tela sigware.
So the
le te gato de kala le te namu jawuchibi niwa te ane tang asam guten shana yang ijinam siktin shaya tela le bakcha sigware.
So when we say, we talk about the propensities, karmic propensities, we talk about them as sort of like the karmic, the power, the karmic ability of karma to give rise to its result. That is, after the action, the karma, the action itself is completed, then this kind of propensity or ability is good here. Ability is deposited or impressed, stained within the consciousness, and that's yeah.
Da le shiba se de la chila khasore tanju lula le tegi phacha nami jo chi bi niwa de kana le di phacha chi pa ma sha ba ina yang le shiba khorang obo injang ani shiba tegi nami jo chi bi niwa yo ar kora jo di le shiba tegi chin ko are wa shiba obo injang
legi bacha balanyal
파자 인지 그 샤고고 말해. 파자 샤바 요아르데 레디 시바티기 레디 저우지 봐.
알았어.
와. 가세 라가 유르 레네 장 저우양다 지고 르바지 레디 강네 유르도 치바다지 이나양 레디 남의 그 저우 징그리 진다 가라서 레디 시바 뚝시 마제가 아니 저우 징거 말했어.
식배양.
식박이 좀 봐요. 아래 식박을 양 저우지 못네 식박양 오버와.
아니 균을 식바 그런 균
레가바 레식바 식바 두송거와
균
식바
So the way this
유랑 쓰고 말이고 유랑 쓰고 말이 식바
식바
레 식바 그런 거 오셔거다.
So what this is referring to is that we can present an account of karma giving rise to results over a long duration of time, where the event of the karma is separated from the event of the ripening of that karma. The result of that karma coming forth can be separated by a long duration. And one can present this in terms of like a kind of propensity placed within the mental, within the consciousness, whether you use the mere eye as the base for this, or the mental consciousness as the base for the establishment or the placing of this kind of propensity. But one can also speak in terms of the disintegration of the karma. This term is extremely difficult to translate, or at least I have not come up with a good translation for it. It's like the disintegrate of the karma, that the karma, when it stopped, has ceased. So that stoppage or exhaustion of the action itself is a functioning thing, which generates in the next subsequently another. There's an exhaustion or stoppage of that exhaustion, and those operate as in a causal sequence, or in a sequence. And then eventually serve as a condition for the arising of the result of that karma. 식비식바.
식비식바, right? 식바 고란 식디가네 식비식바 대한 거 보자, right?
So when the disintegration of the karma, or it's like the disintegrate of the karma has itself is momentary and stops, then it serves as a condition, however, for the arising of the next moment, which has the same name of disintegrate, a disintegrate of the previous disintegrate thing, and those are functional things, and thus able to establish a causal relationship between the action and the result that arises.
네. 연경가 그 자와 주디 간 봐. 내 코랑 랑신 주투비 경가 그 자와 매제 봐 인상. 좋아. 랑신 주투비 경가 자와이나 아니 내 코랑 그 뭐네 경가 그 자와 고고 알아. 대매와 인상. 랑신 주투비 자와 매제 봐 인상. 민그 딱 봤음지 자와 봐 인상. 시박이 시방오대.
So when karma gives rise to its result, such that, for example, in producing birth, that activity doesn't exist by means of an essence. There's no essential or inherent nature to that activity functioning in that way. It's merely not designated, nominally designated as such. So that being the case, then mingi So the causality here is merely nominally designated. It's not existing by means of some sort of intrinsic nature or essence.
Oh yeah. No.
We say that something that is not merely designated by thought would have to be independent of causes. It would have to be permanent or could not change, and it would not rely only on parts. It would not rely on parts. Why would that have to be the case? we always say that it would be like that, but why would it be like that? So that's a question. Because Tokpe matana, deni gyukinla turba yomare. My expression of this is not very good. Not merely designated. Tokpe takta maina.
Tobataza maina.
Maina. Deni gyudan kin la damba yomares. Gyukin la turba
Tobataza wina gyudan kila kyo yomarese.
yomares.
Ni.
Any day, deni takpa yang gugures. Takpa, the permanent, takpa. Takpa gugures.
Karisi.
Tobataza maina.
Tobataza na taba kukuruesi.
Takpa gugures. Any chashila tugur yomares. Chashila turba yomares.
Special kyo yomarese.
yomares. Sigurve. Di gyunsen kari yoresa. Ngatsu dindis 균두 딘들 abgire in the gyunsen yabushing even do we don't understand the reason. No.
안들 간 한번에 가르세.
Tope takta maina
Tobataza ina re maina. Maina.
Deni gyudan kenla gyukenla
Tobataza ina indo. Tobataza ina gyudan kila matyo kokure. Tobataza maina re.
maina.
아니 갈세를 tobataza maina. 아니 다 tobataza ina gyudan kila matyo kokes나 거야 지와리. 와 다 tobataza ina 좀더 어마만자기 tobataza ina 규제는 맞아 가지고 그래. 지난 거 오버들 tobataza 말에 규제는 깨워래. tobataza ina 규제는 맞아 그래. 세지도와. 다 tobataza 마이나 규제는 맞아 용거 세디 그때 거야 점도다.
Die ranglugla tokpe takta maina deni gyukenla
tobataza 마이나 라유라 tobataza 마이나 아니 규제는 맞아 용거래. 어때지? 라유라 tobataza 마인바 마이나 아니 규제는 맞아 용거대 자주 되그래. 네.
deni gyunsen karina
tobataza 마이나
tope takta maina gyukenla
지난 거 탐제 민기파 따바잠지래 스러와 민기 따바잠 마이나 라위 주나 아니 칸라야 마대바 샤고 칸라야 마대바 초거레스 주제울라 마 대부줄라 마대바 와 라왕 주나 아니 군대가 나샤타와 말레스 미대바 인자 대부줄라 대비 차와 태그 말레스 라왕 주와이나
So yes, that's correct. That in the so-called lower systems of Buddhist philosophy, that if something is not, if something is merely designated by thought, then it wouldn't exist in effect, or it wouldn't be an actual functioning thing. And it wouldn't depend upon causes and conditions. That things that depend on causes and conditions have to be real in the sense of not being merely nominally or conceptually designated. But in the Prasangika system, it said that in fact that things, the fact that things are merely designated by thought entails that they depend upon causes and conditions, that if things were autonomous, that they existed on their own, then they wouldn't depend upon causes and conditions for their arising. That is that, for example, a result, if it was autonomous, it wouldn't depend upon causes and conditions for its appearance. And so therefore it has to be merely designated, existing as it's nominally or conceptually designated.
그래서
Most.
또배 따서 많이나 라왕도 추구래.
If something isn't merely conceptually designated, then it would be autonomously established. It would exist autonomously. It would exist on its own.
근데 라왕도 춤나 다 규제라 때문에 그래. 당한도 여기 강라 동바 니루마 텔라 탐제롱아주. 강라 돈이 미루마 텔라 탐제 미룽줄 세드와. 어디 집어줘 거래.
So therefore, if something was not just established, existing as it is established by thought, then it would have this autonomous nature. It wouldn't depend upon any autonomy entails that it doesn't depend on something outside of itself. And so, like an effect would appear without any causes or conditions for it arising. This is going to be explained as we go along, and it's explained also in the verse in which, later in the text, where it says that for someone for whom emptiness is justifiable or fitting, is suitable, then everything works. Everything is suitable and fitting.
아야. 저 갑니다. 잘해야 되지.
Since all phenomena exist by way of being established through conceptual designation, what is the establishing consciousness of phenomena of the Buddha ground? Since sentient beings do not know the uncommon conventionalities of the Buddha ground directly, and Buddhas have no conceptuality. The Chutamche Dokpe Taksam ki ngune drupa rees. Chetsan Sangi Kisagi Chu Karsa. Shepa Kandasi Dubgre, Kandashi Sangi Gisagi Chunam, Shepa Kandakande Shagires,
Sangi Gisagi Chudang,
Sangi Gisagi Chu, Di Simchin Sangi Tumomayampe Chu Yorwa. Then
심지어 산재기 도움을 치고 그래서
시기마레 은숨도 시기마레스
심지어 산재기 무슨 시기마레스
은숨도 시기마레스 아니 상게 독바요마레스 상게라 독바요마레스 제찬디 상게 기사기 투모마이비 추 된소 셰파 칸데 샤기레 Dokpa yomare, Sangila Dokpa yomare, Simpson la Sangiki Tumumayan Pichu la.
다 산재기 최대도 다 산재기 투지기 시와 된소 요아레스. 조제글로 가래레스나 심정규래 요아레.
심정규래 요아레.
산재 도비 참아. 산재기 시와 도비 참아. 산재기 구순 투지인데 도비 참아. 요아레스. 산재기 아니 나 첨배 연된데다 무슨도 더 참아요 말했어. 그러나 조직이 참아 섬자 산재라요. 섬자라요 알았어. 아니 산재 고랑기 무슨 참아도 봐이장 참아도 봐이네 조직이 참아 산재라요. 샤그레스. 무슨도 조직되잖아.
무슨도 조직요마.
산재가 투지려 알아. 봐. 섬자가 뒤라 산재기 투지기 참아되다 무슨도 조직이 참아요 말했어. 조직이 참아요 알았어. This go away.
So the answer then is that there is a valid cognition that establishes the qualities of Buddhahood, that the qualities of Buddhahood, such as the special knowledges that Buddhas have and so forth. Of course, sentient beings cannot know those directly. They can't have a sort of perceptual awareness of those qualities. The Buddhas have perceptual direct knowledge of those qualities, of course, and that the Buddha's knowledge of those is a type of valid cognition which establishes the existence of those qualities. And then but for sentient beings that don't have that direct kind of knowledge, they nevertheless can have valid cognition which establishes those qualities. 쪽지기 쌤 어떤 그래서 심신을 So this is inferential knowledge. So, and it's conceptual, and it's through inference then that they're able to establish the Buddha qualities as existing, to establish their existence. It says there's a statement in which it says suchness in, or a translation of a text in which it says suchness in which the profound dependent arising is seen, and there's some statements, and the Tibetan is given here of the reality of seeing. I'm not sure, I'm going to try to translate that, but how does seeing the suchness of dependent arising differ from seeing suchness in general? If suchness of dependent arising is an emptiness, is its basis the process of dependent arising itself, or phenomena understood to be dependent arising, or third alternative, what is it? So, Zamu Denjungi Zikbe Dekonani, Denjungi Dekonani, Denjungi Deni. Denjungi Deni. Deni. Dekonani.
Denjungi Dekonani.
No. Di Denjungi Dekonani tan Dekonani Chidang Kepa Karyure, Kepa Yorebes.
Chidang Denjungi Dekona Sikana, Kasore, Kojuni Yore, Dene Junga Jibe, Ane Arashinji Matuba, Sina, Denjungi Dekona Chikche. Yang Denjung Kona Cheshi Chone, and Titi Tony Dombani Sasona, Denjungi Dekonani.
So there's two ways of explaining this. If you talk about the suchness or reality of dependent origination, one can say that you can use dependent origination as a reason why things are devoid of essence. They have no essence. And then an alternative would be to take dependent origination itself as the sort of basis of investigation, and to ascertain the essencelessness of dependent origination itself, these two things. Denjungi Dekonani Tongpanina, Deshi Denjung Karang ya Chu Shen Denjing Dawa Chungwa Di Karikari Oresa. How would you? Dakshi. No. Di Mare Chu Denjing Dawa Chungwa. Denjing Dawa Chungwa Yorwa.
Then Dawa Chungwa. So you could try to go
Chu Kurang, Denjing Dawa Chungwa Shena.
Denjing Dawa Chungwa Shena. Don't you see it?
Tongshi Shigre.
Only cigarette. Oh, that Denju la Tarama Boshera, Denju said, Gujan and I gave a Denju say chick. Ranga Gujan gave it Denju Raba. Tetrawate, Shela. Young Chashela Dena Trubala, Denju says it. The young Telatoni Domagoche. Telatoni. Dark but some Denju, Mingi Park, dark but some Denju, Sina, 안텔라 돈이 더 고고하래.
So again, there's those three types of dependent origination that we mentioned, where you can say that things depending upon their causes and conditions for their arising is their dependently originated nature, their being dependent originations. That is a relatively coarse understanding of it. Or things depending upon their parts for their existence. A thing depends upon its parts, for it is dependent upon, arises in dependence on its parts. That is a second order of dependent origination. Though both of those are relatively coarse in the sense that one can understand them without understanding emptiness necessarily. But then the third type of dependent origination, that things are merely designated, if you understand that properly, then one will understand emptiness.
Yeah.
Did that get at your question, kind of? Yeah, okay. Oh.
Yeah. That did my good dialogue there. Dinala Tendesundua. Raji Nidu Bala Tende Yala Juni Yukono Kwa Kotu.
Again, there's a
Lomeo.
The Kasan Gendorji Rabji Chogi Samason.
Samason. Young Loshaku. I do go and could log in that. I don't go to my dead Lord. Think the logo made Raji Nidu Bala Tende Yala Juni Yukono Kwa Kotu starting as a shawache. That call Kotu Koala Tarbi Tarpa. Ani Koala Tarbi, Koala Kotu Sheni. Ani da Kovi Dunga Medena Koala Tabe Taba Tendu Goinza. Raji Georgia Bala Tarba Shavari. Tabata. The Tielman Yomari Raji Georgia Bala Taba. Tabatang, and the Tabati Chita Toba, Tabatoba, Tony Dog with Sudi Asia, Jojabala.
So it's explained, this is in a different text, but it's discussing the same subject matter, that the 18th chapter of chapter of this text explains liberation. And Rabji Choge Bala explains.
Taba Chita Toba, and a Taba Tobit, and a Taba Toba, Tony Dog with Sudi, Jojabala.
So the 18th chapter explains liberation, how one achieves liberation, and why it's necessary to understand emptiness in order to achieve liberation.
That Rabji Nishibala, and it don't buy me, then you go to do, then you don't be telling to Sungwari.
Then the 24th chapter explains how dependent origination has as its meaning emptiness.
In that dead, Tambodella, Annie, Dandiana Junior Kwaku to the Asia. Then Dandiana Junior Kwaku to the Tigana, and a koala type of Tabadera, Jojaba de Asia. Then T. Jella, then you don't between the shade, the Rabjini Shiba to chair, the Sundua. What they don't get Tamboma, the Raji Niduba local in that day. Raji Georgia will go to my dad's local in Rwa. Then she lost Sarava, go to my dad's.
So then that's why this is presented in this order, that the 26th chapter explains how one cycles, how one circles around in the cycle of samsaric existence. And then the 18th chapter explains, and based on understanding that, one can develop renunciation. Then the 18th chapter explains what liberation is, how one achieves it, why it's necessary to understand emptiness to achieve liberation. And then the 18th chapter, the 24th chapter explains the dependent origination as having the meaning of emptiness. And that's why we started with the 26th chapter.
Oh, yeah. That dila. That dame be take on in la jubitu, say Adela. That was the subject of my young do the Intella. Carre Sana. And take on in la jubitu down. Take on a Lundankawa, take on a division bar, said that was young do the. That didn't ma Chegala. 고디마 대스마 주고 선주와.
So since I've done the 26th chapter, then I'm going to read a bit. We're going to read a little bit back at the beginning of the 18th chapter.
오야. 다더니 제가 대권한일 주비 수대라. 대권한지 따와 때라 배바당. 대권배 녀진도 비rim바세.
So this first chapter then has multiple subdivisions. As we've seen, there's and within them the explanation of the text. This is back at the beginning of chapter 18 on page 123 of the Tibetan. I'm not sure the translation. And it says, so in order to explain that, that's the way in which one enters into reality and how one avoids contradicting scripture to establish that on the stages of leading one into reality and the characteristics or definition of reality and then the final section of that. The first of these has to do with the way of entering into reality, and first one has to establish what reality is.
이러면 가디 니몬바당 레라 소와 남 피시 총제라 소와 따르스 다 나네 믿음바 대권하니 마이 신도 대권하니스나 대권하니 마 장신이 또 마이 신도 시원남라 대권하니지 남바 나와 이나 니 대권하니지 전 강이라 대권하니라 주비 전 시다 인세나.
So it starts off with a question as far as the first section, how to establish the view of reality. And then here it starts off with a hypothetical question or a question that might arise. Here it's said, if it's the case that that karma, that the mental afflictions and karma, etc., are like a city of the Gandharvas. This means a city of the Gandharvas is like an apparitional city that one sees in which the way it appears does not coincide with the way it exists. So just like a city of the Gandharvas is not real, it does not real, but foolish people, it appears in the aspect of being real to foolish or childish kinds of beings.
돈이 대관에 돈이 댐바 임바체 다 레랑 이 가서 레당 니몰라스 토소와 대관에 이르베스나 다 댐바 대관에 말이 레당 니몰라스와 대관에 이나 댐바 인고래 댐바 이나 데둘로서 말이다.
So if we say generally then that when we say what is it that's reality or real, something is real or reality. For example, emptiness is reality, but in the case of karma and the mental afflictions and karma and so forth, they're not true. They're not real in that sense. So something being real or true, real here, is a thing in which the way it appears and the way it exists coincide. That there's an accordance between the way something exists and the way it appears. So we say that emptiness is true or real because it exists in the way that it appears. And here, that's established from the point of view of the way in which emptiness appears in the non-conceptual meditative absorption of a Arya being who has direct perception of emptiness. But even though we say it is true or real in that sense, we nevertheless would say that it's not established as being real. It's not truly existent or truly established, really established.
어떤 레다 니모라 소와 다 덴바 마레 태코나니 마레 덴바 마임바데 나조다 내서 미튼 바레스.
So karma and the mental afflictions and so forth, those are not real. They're the way they appear and the way they exist does not coincide. There's a discordance between the appearance, the way they appear to us, and the way they exist.
인자 주바데 두성고 디테코나니 가인이라 테코나니라 주바 치다이 셴나스 친한 경우 마미 빼 나다 치라 아니 나다 다그 좀 나바 탐제 친한 그 오보 마미 빼 세데 지당 오 마미 봐 마이 바체 가수래 댐비옹 친한 거 오보 마미 빼 댐바 투바 마미 빼 나다 치당 나다 치라 다그와 좀 나바 탐제도 세바니 라 태코나니도 라
So then the text here says, and here, what is, if you say, what is reality and how does one enter into reality, then the reply follows that by not observing inner or outer things and by the exhaustion or extinction of all of the different sorts of grasping at a self or that which pertains to a self with respect to inner and outer things, then that extinction of that grasping is reality.
다 대코나니라 주비 추인게와니 주발에 니몬께나 멀리 직조라 다주시와나지 딸래 주마 로이 통주지 나닌디 유도 또잖아 나줘봐이 다니 고바 체 제소지 샤바다를 샤와차라 때 가르서 그래서나 다 가소리 니몬비 녀진 제가 나질라 소베 니몬비 녀진 탐제 중사대 가발에 중화래서나 다주 고디 샤바나지 직조지 따와라 되네 중화래 직달라 되네 중화 직달라 되네 중화대 통화 인장 다 가소리 녀와 동아 대우 동아대 메테나 동아 칸에 주위 시대 안에 단지 말이 바베 기다래 딸래 중화라이 통교신스 나는 뒤도 또 전에 서란 나는 뒤도 또 전에 세들라 지단 자단 이와래 좋아 나 세대 가소리 다 세대 가제 달라잖아 가제한다 라신지 주발라 전에 가자다 라신진 주와데 아니 당진 직다티기 유도 또바 챤네 아니 난조 바이기 다 가자다 라신지 주와데 고바치 그래 직자 나데
가자다
라신지 주와들라 챤 가자다 라신지 주와들라 챤네 다니 니 유도 또 챤나 당진 테기 진당 유도 또바 챤네 아니
So, in order as far as the manner in which one enters into reality, an expanded explanation of that is given in this verse from the introduction to the Middle Way by Master Chandrakirti, where it says that once one sees with one's intellect that all of the mental afflictions and the faults arising from the mental afflictions, here referring to all of the different kinds of suffering and so forth, being born and suffering and death and all of those different forms of faults that arise from the mental afflictions, that all of those arise from the view with respect to the perishable aggregates. Having seen that, seeing that, and having understood that the object of that view of the perishable aggregates is the self. Here, self is glossed in a couple of different, two different ways. One is taking it as the object of negation, the thing to be negated, which is something existing by means of its own essence, something being established by means of its own essence. And having understood that object, having understood that self to be the object of this this wrong view of the perishable collection, then the yogi or yogini ceases the self, and that's.
제 가르쳐도 다 가르쳐도 가르쳐도 어떤 가르쳐도 제가 가르쳐도 다 세제 가르쳐도 되라 이지라 다 가르쳐.
Does the English translation construe the text in that way? Is that the way?
가르쳐도 다들
Do they take self in that line to refer to the self, which is the thing to be negated, the object of negation? Yes.
오야. 다투잖아 지금 말해. 양 나는 네 유도 또잖아. 난저 바이 다는 고바 제세대 다대. 지디 mü도 집에 타냐베다. 가사대샤. 라 다는 네 유도 전에서 지디 mü도 집에 타냐베다 강사대. 다는 네 mü도 또바 전에 Dini miyu di nanjo bayi dani kwaba che se gana miyu ka tanya bi dagi tindu ane gacha ka dati kwaba cheba janaya tigwari.
So there's another way of construing this word self here, which you can take the word self here as referring also, another way to read it is by taking it as referring to the conventionally existent self, which is the sort of the primary object that one, the objective object that one sees, that is seen by this view of the perishable aggregates, and then you can read it in that way as well. So, when you read it that way, you say that the self here is the conventionally existing self, which does exist, and on top of that, the wrong view of the perishable aggregates sort of adds to that the notion that that self exists as essentially by its own right, and that quality is understood and ceased by the yogi or yogini.
Oh yeah, 최소지 샤바다 샤와차라 디니다 자라네비 초점 세기 인소 다다다다데 디다 고에 그 텐데위 단테 단진데라 다그와 준비지다 당 안지기 지다 니요르 바다 디셰르 바다 디마셰기 순거레 디라니 초점 샤바차 당 오인지 주바단 대 다그와 오인지 주바 크바담바스 와当我你去出嘎，当我你去出嘎巴因呗，当我你去出嘎呗，是把它了，但呢，大概我你出的去吧，对吧？所以这你的话，是吧？
So then it says, therefore, this kind of explanation that's given in, just as it's explained in the introduction to the middle way, in that verse and so forth, one should understand here as all, as well, that this applies to this in this context too. And here it's just giving merely in the root text, it's giving just the basic position which is explained. And then in order to explain this in more detail, there's two subdivisions. A refutation that the self exists by means of its own essence, And by means of that, understanding that that which pertains to the self also, by means of that refutation, one's also able to refute the notion that that which pertains to the self is existing or established by means of its own essence as well.
다더니 나 원이 주어가 세대 다데 타냐비다 가사 세대 나 원이 주어가 봐나 원이 주어가 봐체 다 세대 가사 대다기 원이 주어 크바 세가라 다기와 산 다기 론제자 다기와 세대와 다니 다기와 세랑 한신 주어 크바 세가라 마이와 다기와 세 랑도데 마도바기 아니 다기위 천시 아니 등아이 론제자 미다 나와다 마이 수 마이 아니 론제자 딘들라 다기와 레디 딘스시고 말이.
So here it says the self and that which belongs to the of the self, literally that which is of the self or belongs to the self. Here, self is referring to the conventionally existent self, the person, the I, these things which do in fact conventionally exist, but it's rejecting the notion that those exist by mean or established by means of their own essence. And the same thing applies to that which is of the self. Here, the term of the self generally we understand that in terms of the things which are enjoyed or utilized by the person, by the self, such as clothes and objects, external objects and such that are possessions of the self or used by the self. But here it's dagiwa di rangdo. This is referring to the, it's like the mind itself, the mind as a sort of a unique thing rather than the possessions of the self, the mind or of the self as a sort of a specific thing rather than referring to things which belong to the self.
Oh yeah, that only to a gabatella and Tanji Toma Java Chilo, Tenant Dame Betawa Della Belu, that Dame Tawa Della Bacolagota, Java Chene, Ani Dame Della Bacoa, the Tambo Java Candicevare, Sena, that Gasore. 대시 토마 좀된 대시 최탐보 송대가라 아니 대시 손이 대시가 나네 디니 동아 파비 덴바오 디니 군중 파비 덴바오 디니 고바 파비 덴바오 디니 람 파비 덴바오 스타 대시 손이가라 디자 가지고 아래에서나 디니 군 동아 파비 덴바오 세가라 다 다장가라 나라도 시와나 신체네 사제 예례지 풍보 차와도 지그 동아 풍보대 안에 동아 파비 덴바래
Papi de Mare, Sachi Nieling,
Yele Pumbongara Pumboti,
Sachi Nieling Pumbola, Conda, Nipadi, Sachi Nieling Pumbo.
Sachi Nieling Pumbo. How do you in the Dunga Papi Demba, say, Dunga Papi Demba, the Garsana Sachi Nieling Pumara Pumboti, and it's Dunga Dembare.
So there, then the next subdivisions of the text are with regard to rejecting the notion that the self exists by means of its own essence. That has two subdivisions where it says that someone who desires liberation, the way in which someone who desires liberation initially engages in an investigation or analysis, and then the way in which one establishes the view of selflessness based upon that. And then the first of these, again, is such that the method by which someone who desires liberation initially engages in an analysis of this. The Buddha taught the four Arya truths in order to explain this, and the true suffering, the truth of suffering. The first of those is for Aryas is understood as referring to the contaminated aggregates which are taken up, appropriated by karma and mental afflictions.
Oh, 대마시 오라 땀니 대제라 따둥아 시와차 군중 빵와차 고방원도차 남곰 전에다 좀더 토마 쉐탐보송디 도송아 따둥아 시와차 군중 빵와차 고방원도차 남곰바차.
So the Buddha at the very beginning, when he was teaching the Dharma and he taught the four Arya truths, he said that one should understand suffering, one should abandon the origin of suffering, one should actualize cessation, and one should cultivate the path. One should develop the path.
대인자다 동아시에와 제에 가나 사전일이 풍부의 동아지 라신도 시리 가나 다 동아라 메데바 로제고 와래 동아라 메데바 로제디 가나 동안 도바 제발라 단 동아지 주 군중 방고와 인장 동아시에와 다 대우 동아 메데나 아니 동아지 주 말도 발다 대우 동아 메도 바 인장 아니 주 군중 방와차.
So the first two of these are related in that first one has to recognize that the contaminated aggregates which are taken up by karma and the mental afflictions are suffering. They have as their nature suffering. And having understood that, one should develop then the desire to get rid of them, to abandon them. And one has to understand as well that without the cause of them existing, that they themselves will not arise, and has to recognize that the cause, which is the origin of suffering, is to be gotten rid of. And so it starts off through knowing the effect and then making effort to get rid of the cause of that effect.
오야, 내 군주 빵바게 빵바텔라 고방원도 차. 군주 빵에 빵바테 탈바르다. 와 탈바 고방원도 차. 고방원도 차와라 고방원도 제제기 아니 So
then, in order to abandon the origin of suffering, which gives rise to suffering as such, one has to actualize the cessation of it. Cessation, the third of the four truths here. One has to actualize that cessation. In order to actualize the cessation, one has to cultivate the path. The path is the source, the way in which the cessation of the cause of suffering is actualized.
타바트니 지신 미제베스 차원 도시기 동아데 풍보디 동아지다 동아지 랑신도 마셰심 마셰바 풍보디기 녀미 마삼나 아니 풍보 차와도지 그 동아데라 타르바게 아니 타바트니 그 로디게 투고 말레스 도데 녀미 삼나 마베나 타바트니 지신 미제베스 군중 고유 주르 마사나 아세 마리 발라데나 니완 도시기 레사 레디 남시 유권에 때네 아니 가소래 인삼 제대 조화를 주도 인삼 제대 아니 동아지 콜로코비 수대 마시나 아니 코이 싸와 단제 말아봐 말이봐 아니 제주디 미셰베 인자 아니 가서 그좀 코이 짜서 실행에 좀 쪼셔 땀바탕 세가라 두대 시위 고네 아니 차와도 저기 동아텔라 이중이 내중기 왔지당 군중 사람이 고네 아니 코에 자와 단생 머리 바가 아니 지주 단생 머리 바 셰와데 개침버레 세가나 군중 코에 주를 마사나 코에 자와 지주 메셰바 시량의 중 저些担保的 코와 관계 증바 셰와 제세다데 코와 관계 증바 셰와 제 코와의经济그 로데 가르서 내다니 뭐니라와
That's month.
가면 이제 당연히 가지고 알아서 다나 두대님이 삼나 마베나 타바트니 지심이세 사제님이 풍부지 동아지 라신도 통이 님이 마삼나 아니 동아라 탄데고로 지금 말해
So
나다래도와 두대니 타바트니 지심 메제베
So, if one wishes to give rise to the desire to achieve liberation, this has to derive from recognizing the defects of the aggregates, the contaminated aggregates, which are appropriated by karma and the mental afflictions. Unless one contemplates those defects and the negative consequences of having those aggregates, then there's no way that one can give rise to the desire to achieve liberation. One has to recognize that the suffering, the first of the four truths, arises out of the origin of suffering, which is described in the factors of dependent origination, where you have the consciousness, ignorance causing the mental formations which deposit propensity within the consciousness, that those causes give rise to the result of all of the other factors of the actualized factors, the projective factors and such, that are the mass of suffering. And without understanding that, first of all, recognizing the defects, deficiencies of the aggregates, which contaminated aggregates appropriated by karma and mental afflictions, then there's no way to generate the wish to get rid of the causes that give rise to them, and thus no way to produce the desire to achieve liberation.
Oh yeah. Tai, 군중 코위 주를 마셈나 코위 자와 제수 메시베 세가나 군중 코위 주름 간데에서는 당강부터 가산 해야 되기.但是嘛，原来就南站就马里不过来了，因为第一个来的，아니 소나도소나 많이 빌래 니와 두제게 레데사 레데 파자 남시기도 거바데 아니 실랭그 땀니 아니 가소레 리루 가르도 년잠 자데 아니 동아 바도메 반연주 지와라 어디 군중 코위 주를 마삼나
So the verse that we're discussing here says that if you don't think about the way samsara develops, the way in which samsara develops, then there's no way to develop the wish to achieve liberation. And where it says the way samsara develops, how one contemplates that, this is, as we said, refers to the way in which the first factors of dependent origination, ignorance, mental formations, and the consciousness, which is infused with the propensities of these of karma, that functions as the source for the arising of samsara. That's the contemplation and meditation that is recommended here.
그러와 그래서 거기 자와디 말이 붙이기 어려워. 그러와 거기 자와 제주 메시베. 그러와
So until one recognizes, understands the root of samsara, and again this refers back to ignorance.
오이자 근데 실행에 좀 조사된 바당 세가나 동아기 님이 삼비관에 안에 좀 제와 직당 두대기 님이 삼비관에 좀 제와 직당 코비 주를 군중 코비 주름 삼바 안에 삼비관에 코와를 친제기 남대 로데 가르레에서나 자유마 아니 가서 때려라 지는 이제 토미 말을 받아 내가 님은 지니 받아 아니 시그 와래 시와디 다 대충벌에 송아래 호바 관계 증바 셰와지
고와 관계
호바 관계 증바 셰와지 내가 니몽 셰와 증제대 내가 니몽 셰와 오데지라
So then, and it says, therefore, one should know that which binds one to samsara. What is it that ties us into samsara, which binds us to it? One has to understand, and what is it that the thing that binds us to samsara is, again, those factors of dependent origination, of ignorance, and the mental formations of karma, and the consciousness infused with the propensities of karma. Those are the thing that cause us to be tied to samsara.
Oh, that is the do then she Thomas soon be in best. Do not demba de demba she and didn't do not probably demba, do not shewa, Charles, Thomas soon be rimbe, Tambo, Coachidang. Cherak Coachi, Dungada, Cheratrovaso Soki, and it Dungaji, Yemi Mantu Combana. Roa, Ananjoa di Tequananila Juba to Grace, Carre Sana, Tequana Jubate, Dunga, Mutena, Dungaji to Maripatoko, Maripatokore, Maripatobala, and then Maripaki, Shayumeba Tobe, Shayumeba, and Samotomba Nitella, and then Juba to Grace, Roa, Dashing. 코유께 깨질라서 제가 나질라 쏘아 당 니와 되자라 소비 님바 말려봐 아니 본데디 용그레 본데 봐중라.
So that's all by way of an explanation of what follows in the text, where it says that by the sequence in which the four truths are taught, in which the truth of suffering is explained as being the first of the four truths. So at the beginning and at the first, one has to contemplate or meditate upon the general and the specific defects, deficiencies of samsara. So the general deficiencies, defects of samsara that apply to all of the different states of samsara, and the specific ones that are particular to specific realms. One has to meditate on that a great deal, develop that understanding. And when one has done that, then the yogi or yogini will wish to enter into reality. Here, the yogi or yogini wishing to enter into reality, that refers to if you have meditated upon the defects of samsara, and in the way that we've discussed, then you'll come to recognize that they're rooted in the source of them is ignorance, the first of the 12 links, factors of dependent origination, and that ignorance is such that it's the object that it grasps at is completely non-existent. It's grasping at a non-existent object, and which is contrary to reality. So one who wishes to enter into reality must then it gives rise to someone who is wishing to enter into reality, gives rise to the desire to get rid of all of the faults of samsara, which are the defects of samsara, which are birth, death, and so forth, and all of the faults of samsara, such as the mental afflictions of desire and so forth. That yogi or yogini will give rise to that kind of desire, the wish to get rid of them.
Oh yeah. That is any Jumalone do call me to but do me to but tone. That call the cheese our Jen and the Toba Chedigala, Tabana, and you call say that Karesana, Mindasa the Koas and the Karesana, Lanyi pumping, Sajan Yeli Pumbodre. Do not call Jan Pumbo. 两年级旁边我那碰不得了，我就先出过来，他吃脚嘛家一呢，是吧？我听着有年龄就碰面年对，我让就去3年我连不碰不得，你看说考完的，几早啊建议你们到把7点钟大把那考啊几点早啊见到，几点的早啊见的。3年龄就碰不得，你几点给早啊见到通行，是吧？
So it says then, at that time, you, having seen that if one doesn't get rid of the cause, that there will be no way to stop the effect from arising, then one will think, what sort of foundation or root does this samsara have? What is the root of this samsara? Samsara here again refers to the contaminated aggregates which are taken up, are appropriated by due to karma and the mental afflictions. So it's called, those are called samsara because that's what one cycles and wanders around within. So one thinks that, and then once one has a thought in that way, has examined it in that way, one comes to see that this samsara, the aggregates which are the contaminated aggregates, are rooted in the wrong view of the perishable aggregates.
Oh yeah, that 记得可以早见到通的怎么？他记得考完多把啦，那假设可以早记得多过完演讲。 他记得其他的老板帮我吃个人是呐，我他都是我不的，是吧？这是吧？
So then it says, by getting rid of, and then by having seeing that, and by getting rid of those, that then all of the one comes to see that by getting rid of those, all of the mental afflictions and other faults are stopped, are prevented. And then if you ask, if someone asks a question, well, what is it that in what way is one going to be able to get rid of this wrong view of the perishable aggregates?
那这里这我写了个，而且他们这个，你看的是七级落电证给同其他的属于，你有也。 真正的其他属于正当的有电报出发太了，那是单呢，你电报出发准备，你有些准备的，你多把钱把个塔单都行吧，是吧？知道？那等到那些地个，钱包都那些地，大康都送完，几大个，我有个准备，几大属于大的，让些去出呢，你让些去出备，几大他妈卡中都出国嘞。 让先去这个记得他妈看中都马住呢，让先去马住吧，现在，他让先去出吧的，出那记得他妈看中出关的出国现在，他都是搞个我那么听个的啊。
So then it says, if you think that way, and how is it that one gets rid of the wrong view of the perishable aggregates? The reply is that, in general, all of the chapters of this text that we're studying are taught in order to refute the existence of the object, which is grasped by this mistaken sort of mind. Mistaken sort of mind here, or mistaken cognition, is referring then to the grasping the wrong view of the perishable aggregates. So they're all taught for that purpose, to refute or to. Did I get that right? 第有情嘅真不多个啦。第有情嘅真不多啦。
真不多啦是，真不多把钱把的，然后他们这个点过来是，你那个时候看的三个话的是，然后你看的做不把的看的点过来是那，你记得说明，记得要往俺这个记得的，我有个准备记得， 원티 수위 딱 세대 가자다 라신지 추와테 아 라신지 춤나 아 라신지 추비 직당 도마 강도 추바레에서 따디 다 직당 도마 강도 맞rum나 아니 직당 도마 맞rum나 아니 다 라신지 맞주바 맞줄 거래 봐
So it says then, by teaching these refutations of the object as it's grasped by that sort of mind, then one's able to stop the subjective grasping at that. And in particular, in this chapter here, it takes the self which is held by that wrong view of the perishable aggregates, and it examines, it investigates whether or not that kind of a self exists either identical with the aggregates or as apart from the aggregates. That's one sort of examination and investigation here. So one would say here that if the self existed by means of its own essence, if it existed as it's apprehended by the grasping at things as being real, then it would necessarily exist as a unitary thing or as a multiple thing. And if one's able to exclude both of those possibilities, that it's unitary or multiple, or if it's identical with the aggregates or it's different than the aggregates, then one's able to negate the existence of that essentially existing type of self.
是吧？哦，这读啊，既然它的强度越大的是有水平有关呢，是讲它既然它的对面呢，它我那么听过的，距离远呢，既然他妈卡中都有关，是吧？既然他妈卡中来嘛，卡中嘛因比有时候碰上不起买吧。 是吧？既然他们没得越把美人对人的偏正版的搞起来，是吧？那钱，搞既然既然那既然他们卡中的有过来，既然他们卡中的没过来，提醒都让心机准备，让心机准呐，让心机准备，既然他们卡中的有过来，让心机准备，既然他们卡中的没呢，那让心机没过来，是吧？人家大呢，大让心机准备，既然他们卡中的没把人上让心都。 出发的水平有关呢，安尼大给我，这边把的安尼大把送信。
So here, the way the reasoning goes is that if something exists, if like a self, let's say a self, for example, if something exists, it necessarily has to exist as a single thing or as a multiplicity, as many things. There's no third alternative to those two ways of something existing. Those categories are comprehensive and mutually exclusive for the way something can exist, either as a unitary or a plurality. And so, if that's the case, then the self, if it's an intrinsically existing self or a self established by its own essence, if it exists, it either has to exist as a unit, a single thing, or as a multiplicity of things. And once one is able to refute both of those alternatives, that an inherently existing self exists as a unitary thing or as a multiplicity, a complex thing, you might say, then if you've rejected both of those possibilities, there's no third possibility, third alternative, and then therefore there can't be a self of that type. And then one would by rejecting both of those positions, one is able to stop grasping at a self or that which pertains to the self.
Oh, then that I think to control long time at that time the 시자와 논데기 요라 다음에 토나니 시비사병 가봐 주로 세 자와라 숨바 나신 있잖니 당진기 요라 다음에 시가나 아니 직다기 소위 미용하텔라 미용하테유 미비용하텔라 아니 가자다 라시지 추와 매바데 토나 아니 텐드와데 통위 로데 통순 광바의 제베 아니 가서를 코알라 좋아 타바톱도 그래 유라다며 도마니 시비 사변 가바 줄 세라.
This is explained also in the 400 verses of Master Aryadeva as well, which a verse that we've cited previously as well, where it says that if one sees the absence of a self within the object, then the seed of existence is stopped. So here, what that's referring to is with the false view of the perishable aggregates. It takes as its principle, its basic object, the I or the self, and then it ascribes, it clings to that I or self as if it were existing intrinsically, inherently, by means of its own essence. And that quality of existing intrinsically, inherent, by means of its own essence is false, doesn't exist within the object, the I or the self. And therefore, when one sees the absence of that kind of self within the person or within the self, then the seed of existence is stopped, as mentioned earlier.
대신도 다시 주원하시 뒤수용 매반이 대봉원이 뉴바인 시송배 신다 전부 탐제 추진라 광바지다 양직도 세가라 다 남들이 가수 기다 말을 바기 아니 소위 디유 아니 라신지 추바데 가서 다도 추바데 시 마시바 시 체데테 아니 남에 봤더베 로데 마콘발라 아니 당세 본이고 말이 디스어 매반이 대봉원이 니마인 인자 남들 가서 소야당 디니 가서 소야데라 직다 코랑라 차라 남들 가서 소야데 라자 티비제도 추바서 받체 시자와당 탄주 가라이나 나랑 시지 추바서 봐 남들 가서는 나랑 하자 추바서 봐다 되니 가자라 차라를 말 마도 아니 진바데 뽕알라 당생기 현유수인 줄거데 다 공바치다 양치기 말이.
So it says, therefore, by stopping the, one stops the seed of existence, and this quote then says that by seeing that the self, as it's grasped by the grasping at a self, does not exist, then one is liberated from existence. And it says that this is necessary. That is necessary to do that in order to be liberated from existence. The same basic procedure is expressed as well in the compendium of valid cognition by the Master Dharmakirti, in which there's a verse which says, unless one has rejected this object, will not be able to get rid of that. And here, can Dio Sungchung Meparni?
디유수용 매반이 대봉원이 뉴바인 디자 거와줘서나 직다대기 직다대기 요 다도 좋아지 수용 마좀 봐라 아니 다도 접어진 다 직다 다도 좋아지 직다대 봉이고 말했어
직다대 닥터슨베 So where it says until one has eradicated, gotten rid of the object of this, here referring to the false view of the perishable aggregates, this wrong view of the perishable aggregates, which takes as its object the I, and then attributes to the I some kind of essential existence. That until one's able to get rid of that grasping at the I as existing in an essential way, then one's not able to get rid of that. The text says, and here that is referring to the wrong view of the perishable aggregates itself. So in this case, we see that since the master Dharmakirti gives us the same procedure for getting rid of the wrong view of the perishable aggregates, which is to negate the object which is grasped by that kind of misconception. Both the and then the master Aryadeva, as well as his teacher Nagarjuna, say the same thing. So we see then that in all of these, the systems of philosophy of the both of these schools, they're in agreement that this is the basic procedure for eliminating the wrong view, that grasping at the perishable aggregates in the wrong way. They differ in terms of the degree of subtlety of the object of that misconception of the perishable aggregates, when such that, as we mentioned in the compendium of valid cognition, it's held that that the object of this wrong view of the perishable aggregates is holding the self as existing as a self-sufficient substance, whereas here it's holding the self as existing by means of an essence. There's a difference there, but the basic procedure is the same idea. So yeah, the notion of self, which is the thing to be negated, is differentiated.
Oh yeah, 다 준전 대치 당정이 기타 송화탕, 당정이 다 기타 송화탕, 소인다 처만매비 리베 소인다 세야데 다 가자게 다데, 처만매비 리베 레바 수진비 다 수미셰바, 다 ting에와 시고래 대수 마셔봐. 이 다단 다메바 쯤발라 추두와 이 다란 다도 쯤바야 메시 다도 메바야 메심바 다 추두와 잠라스 두와 잠시라 콤바르 체베 스발라 타바데바 밀데 다들라라르샤 봐.
Then the next line of the text says, therefore, without understanding the method of properly refuting the self as it's grasped by the grasping at a self, how that self exists, how it's grasped, how that self is. By stainless reasoning, without understanding the method of rejecting that, properly rejecting that by stainless reasoning, if you simply take your mind and you withdraw it from grasping at a self or grasping at a mind or that which is of the self, you simply are withdrawing the mind from that, and meditate on that, practice meditation on that. Then and you hold that sort of meditation is accepts that sort of meditation liberates one from existence, then that's incorrect.
당진지 유 다라 마쇼장 다음에 바라 슈퍼마레스 카인사나 로코나라 다음에 짐바 다도 추와 짐바 아니 다음에 바 카양 마짐바 숨용거를 로라 로와 다도 짐바 다음에 짐바 아니 다음에 카양 미짐바 수용거와 인상 다마지나 다음에를 주고 마레스 다음에 발라 So
here we can understand then that as far as how mind holds things, how does it apprehend things? One can say that a mind or a cognition can hold things as existing as a self. cognition can apprehend things as existing without a self. There are two alternatives. And then the third alternative is a cognition which is holding things as neither having a self nor not having a self. The third kind of alternative.
因此，当这个有了马修把影响，马修把影响，当们被吞了，修把明白，当这个有了马修被有了马修被，安尼卡说的，当这个有打了马修被落地宽白，当这个讲那个嘛的。
So the reason the above sort of procedure is incorrect is, and then there's some reasons given below here, that kind of meditation that's mentioned above, even though it doesn't engage with the self, it doesn't engage the self, which is the object of grasping at a self. Since it does not engage with the meaning of selflessness, meditating on that, cultivating that kind of cognition, doesn't do anything at all to harm or negate the grasping at a self.
因此，当真有了马修把给官白当真了讲明白的意思，安尼当真有了马修把官白当真了那个人呐，太大人呐，安尼太困难，以太阳光把啦，大瓦马尼把。到马诺瓦去也把没过呗，太困难就突然点了白把，虽然跟那个说太困难就点了，虽然把点去，看说点太困难你点了白把，虽然当点去他们家了，他们把做个人事，他们做个人事。
So, as another reason why that kind of view is incorrect is that if that was the case, then there would be no need to obtain an unmistaken view in order to meditate on the meaning of reality. There would be no need to obtain that kind of unmistaken view in order to meditate on reality. And since that would be so, it'd be unnecessary to obtain that kind of view, then the scriptures and all of the scriptures and the treatises and so forth, which are taught in order to establish what the view of reality is, those would all become pointless.
Oh yeah, you chiro. Tersamji tusu tata yin jang, gombi tusu tata mugu xie jang, ma mini des. Tersamji tenla babi kana tata yin jang. Gombi kamla ane te gogu mare rawa dam bitenya ba mugu ma miniti twesam ji tan la papa teni gombi tu ta do tu sim driver chawi chere twesam tan la pa gombi tu su gome tang sim driver chawi chere la twesam ji kan tu su kan tan la papa teni awa kan tan la papa teni ane gombi tu su yang tan la pa bi teni la ane sim driver chaba sim driver chawa ke chere te yin dan da man ju be ka so nan jo ba yi gong gen de ke nan jo ba yi da ni go ba che chen su gu du ga as
ta tok tu sim driver ta tok tu sim driver chawa che tu
ka re
ta tok la
ta ba ka se 나도 관. 아니야 그 권비 퇴수 따도도 셈 지워 쳐봐. 따와대 돈이 또 따와대. 그러와 따도도 강된라 파고 서섬지 군수 된라 파파게 따와티 토도 아니 셈 지워 쳐는 거 맞춰봐.
So therefore one also cannot say that even if that's the case, when one, if it's like that, when one is studying and thinking, even that's the case, even though that may be true, that when one's meditating during the time of meditation, it's not necessary to do that, do it in that way. That's mistaken. One can't say that. Because that which has been established through study and reflection is the establishment of all reality by study and reflection is done in order to habituate the mind to the view during the time of meditation. So la chosamgi den la papa ni
최선지 강단라 파파 티니
dini
아니다 고민내가 나양 야 고민 뒤서야 따도도 최선지 강라 방 단라 파베 따와티 토도 아니 셈 뒤버쳐 그래.
So it's that which has been established through study and reflection, study and analysis. Then when one is done so as for the sake of habituating the mind to the view, to that upon that view during the time of meditation.
Oh yeah.
And then there's a verse that's a quotation from a line of the verse that by Shiwela Najobai.
Najobai 단 공부하지 진겐데 나조바 고고레스 들어와 여기 퇴섬지 고스 고고레 고고 말에 실라와 어때 말에스 나조바기.
So some people say that that study and reflection aren't for yoga, but here then this quotation from this verse, I think by Shantideva is the Najopai Dagni Kokpache di Shiwela di Junjuk. Umajuba. Sorry. So that's the quotation. I'm sorry, I forgot that quotation is from Introduction to the Middle Way by the Master Chandrakirti. So it says a yogi should stop or negate the self, and so that's that an evidence that. A yogi who is a yogini who is meditating also needs to proceed in that way.
다더니 대제라 다 랑신지 주와 가야 되라. 아니 다다 랑신 주와 가야 돼. 토마 되라. 아니 다 알아도 가장에 있네. 세제. 아니 템비 랑신 집에 직장에 왔다. 투장에 왔다. 차왕에 내시 세대 내시 상에 세대 다 편지 대다 연구가 될 차례 참문도 돼. 그러봐 내시 나왔다는 바발라 내시 송고도와 단디나라 섭제 잠미도 돼. 나왔다는 바발 내시 그래 내开启就돼 담보돼 가장에 네.
So this leads into then the basis for establishing the view, the basis upon which one establishes the view, and the first has four sort of portions. The first of these is the essential point of having certainty with regard to the object of negation.
어때이다 나 판발라 아니 강도 판사게 뱀데 토마 통고와 나신 체니 아니 가자 까발라 강가 가야기 가자디 다뭐 놀라셔가지고 고고하래 가장에네 진주게 다용어라 말을봐 대용어에 좀 인실가라 가자 강가야기 가자기 지대 아니 로유라 마샤발라 아니 가자도 고투고 말해 가자도 까비 동바도 로이도 차그 말해
So here it's necessary to gain a definite ascertainment, a definitive ascertainment of the object of negation, which here is the self which is to be negated, the aspect of the self which is to be negated, and without that, then it's impossible to be able to negate it, to refute it and eliminate it. That's expressed likewise in the verse from the introduction to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, which we quoted previously, which without meeting or without coming into contact with the imagined thing, then there's no way to understand its non-existence. There's no way to understand its non-existence. So that verse, or those lines from that verse, indicate the necessity of properly identifying and having a clear understanding of the object of negation first. So then it says there in the commentary, therefore, in order to get rid of the wrong view of the perishable aggregates, one has to, it depends upon, when one sees that depends upon establishing the essencelessness of the object which is grasped by that, that the self which is grasped by that is devoid of essence, and its object as well. That is 대율스나 대율스나
다임바 당생되기 요대
당생되기 직다
고유자와 직다되기 요대 다임바 통네스
So one sees that its object is the self, having seen that its object is the self, and that the self existing as essentially by its own essence. Then one comes to, at the very beginning, one comes to examine that self, to investigate the self, and by thinking, is it the case that the self, which is the object of this grasping at a self, does that exist by its own essence or not?
다임바 통네스데 디유 진단그 유대 다임바 통네스 나도 준비 미국바데 가르래서나 가사데 미국바 다데 미국바 다데 랑경 오여담 시가나 다야게 다 랑경 오여담 매년도 채통마 다 도바쳐봐 되라 가자기 가사 가소래 같이 채 간제 임바데 다시 다 따야 돼 임바를 같이 지 놀라 차야 돼
같이 지
가자 코란 지스나 튼지 가자 코란 요 말아봐
무슨
당신 주어 요 말아봐 당신이 주어 지대 좀나 튼지 주고를 냠도게 아니 같이 지 튼지 말을 접자 튼지 튼지 저지래다 접자 좀나 튼지 주고를 연나 튼지 요거를 냠바게 접자
So then, here, when we're talking about the object of negation, the self, which is the object of negation, one is identifying and recognizing what that self would be if it existed, the essentially existing self, or the inherently existent self. And one takes, first comes to understand that the object of the grasping at a self is that kind of a self. Here in the text it says self, which exists by its own essence. So in this process of investigating what that self would be like, one forms a concept of what that sort of that inherently existent, essentially existing self is, and that has to appear in the mind clearly. It's a universal or a concept of that inherently existent self. 각지
지들로라 차와주고 그래서 와 가자기 지들로라 마샤와라 가자대 가그냥 멤마동 다 부분 나시레스 거다.
So unless this concept, which is the sort of the universal of a inherently existent self, unless that appears to the mind, to this cognition, investigating the nature of the self, then one's not able to negate it without having a clear understanding of what it is. One's not able to negate it, and it would be like, shooting arrows without having any kind of target to shoot at.
다 대인상 가자의原나 다 가자의原나 가서 랑신지 출발돼. 랑신지 출발돼. 나 랑신지 출발돼.原나 다 풍보당 랑신지 출발 직도 요아래. 타대도 요아래. 잡아쳐야 되라. 原나 랑신지 출발나 랑신지 출발 직당 타 도마 가루도 요거래. 대요거와의 가르에서나 지리연나 직당 도마가루도 요거래. 그러지 직당 도마가루. 직당 도마가루는 매거와. 그러 대차왕이 내세들이. 하고서
직당 도마
예 친제라 야나 도마가루 요거래. 지리연나 직당 도마가루도 요거와디 유주되라 직당 도마 가양 마인바게 풍숨지 와 말했어. 와 대매와 인상 랑시지 연나양 랑시지 주비 직당 도마 가루도 요거래. 대 차왕이 위내들이 와. 시리 주는 연나 직당 도마 가루 여바 인상 랑시지 주나야 랑신 주비 직당 도마 가루도 요거래.
So here, the way one begins investigating this is by thinking that this I, or this self, if it existed by means of its own essence, it would have to exist as either a unitary thing or a plurality, or it would have to either exist as identical with the aggregates or apart from the aggregates. The way this operates is that if something exists in general, it either has to be single or multiple. It has to be a single thing or a plurality. There's no third alternative apart from those two possibilities. Things either exist as unitary things, or as a multiplicity of things. And if that's the case in general, then if something exists by means of its own essence, likewise, it's subsumed. It would have to exist under one of those two categories, as a single thing that exists by means of its own essence, or a multiplicity of complex thing that exists by means of its own essence. This is sort of a basic logical operation that being a single thing or being a multiplicity is a dichotomy which exhausts all possibilities. There's no third alternative beyond those two possibilities, and therefore, if something exists in general, it exists that way, and if something has the specific qualification of being existing by its own essence, in this likewise, it would have to exist within those two categories.
This is good, right? They do Dada Pumbo Ranchi to Chuba Gaba said that. Tetan Dadu Zimbi, you. Miu Dadi, Daddy. Ranking over Yonas, Rangona Yona. Yuzunile Madawa. And the Pumbo that Chita Tata Karu de Grace. Pumbo that Chita Tata Karu Yodu. Can yam to Tapa Chadi. Oh, Rangu Tanji Yana Pumbo that Chita Tata Karu de Yogo at the Carres and Chita Chig Mayimbani, Chig number China, Chuse Yonsu Chako. Chego Punsun Dobby Chiros, Chigmayina, Chigmayimba Gore, Chigmayimba can achieve Gores, Chidan Chigmayim to Mayimbagi, Ani Punsum Jia Mares. That I think the Jubare, the thing is telling you that the Dangware.
So this is this is what we're talking about here is explaining the second of those foundations or bases for establishing the view of reality, which is determining that the pervasion, meaning here that the alternatives of, in this case, something being single or not single, is an exhaustive dichotomy that subsumes all possibilities. And so the commentary here explains this as well, that if the self, in the subdivisions of the commentary, it says the way in which one establishes the view of selflessness has two subdivisions, that the self and the aggregates have the same essence or same nature, and rejecting that, and then the rejection of the idea that the self and the aggregates are of a completely different nature. First of those says that is explaining that the refutation of the aggregates and the self and the aggregates as having the same nature. Here it says, thus, in order to if that Dr. Zimbi, you Dr. If that self, which is the object of the grasping at the self, existed by means of its own essence, then it would have to exist within one of two alternatives. There's nothing beyond two ways that it could exist. It would have to be either identical, it would have to be a single thing, which is established by its own intrinsic identity with the aggregates. So it would have to be identical with the aggregates by means of its own intrinsic identity, or it would have to be separate from the aggregates. So one starts off by examining whether it's single or it's identical with the aggregates, or it's different than the aggregates. And then it's explained here that something being identical or not identical is those are a dichotomy, such that if one excludes one of those two possibilities, identity, for example, then the other one is necessarily determined to be the case. Because there's no third alternative beyond those two, identity and being identical with or not identical with something. So maybe we'll stop there on that.
Dagi Chinye Sawe Gewa Di Tendan Ruwa Kun La Kambenda Cheba Ji Jen Lo Sa